All right, welcome to the Apartment Investor Show, where we help you get smart and invest smarter. I'm your host, JC Castillo, founder and managing principal of the Multifamily Property Group. And joining me, as always, is my good buddy, my co-host, Mr. Paul Peebles, national underwriter for Old Capital Lending. Paulie, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, JC. How about yourself?
Doing fantastic. We've got a special guest today, Paul. Why don't we let you talk about who this person might be here?
I've known this guy for a long period of time. He's a friend of mine. He also is probably the best of the best in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. He works for a small company called Marcus & Millichap, which is a national firm. So in the podcast today, we have Nick Fluellen with Marcus & Millichap here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He is the expert, and I'm glad that he came on to help you find the right deals. So Nick, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. When you were saying all that stuff, I thought somebody else was joining us on the call. So that was very kind of you.
You are the man. So JC, tell us a little bit about what Nick's going to talk about.
I think what we really want to talk about is all you viewers out there, if you're trying to win a deal, if you're competing to win an apartment deal, you may have offered on lots of properties and maybe you haven't had the best of luck. Well, today we've got an expert that's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. We're going to talk about the top 4 ways to win a deal, an apartment deal in a seller's market. And we're going to talk about things besides the obvious, which would be price and earnest money. We're going to talk about what it really takes to win a deal. Let me just give you a couple of quick bullet points out there, you viewers, to talk about the qualifications of this guy and why you should really listen to him when he's going to talk about these 4 ways. So, he is the senior managing director at Marcus & Millichap, and he started at the company in 2004. Now get this, let me read off some stats to you guys about this guy's track record. In 2018, his team, the Fluellen Hoover multifamily team, closed $500+ million in volume of deals. They awarded 53 apartment deals in 2018 with a total of 6,800+ units. And they transacted in 5 states: Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And get this, their M&M ranking out of 2,000+ agents is basically the top 7 team across the nation for Marcus & Millichap. So if you don't listen to anybody else about what it takes to win a deal, this may be the person you want to tune into. So Nick, great track record, and thanks so much for taking the time. Why don't we let you take it away and talk to our listeners about what it takes to win a deal in today's market?
Yeah, no, I would. Thanks for having me on, and I think this is a great topic, and it's certainly one near and dear to our heart because it's a conversation we have on a daily basis with folks saying, "Hey, what do I need to do to be awarded a deal?" And it's frustrating to go chase a bunch of deals and do all the underwriting and the due diligence and finding yourself consistently coming up short. And so obviously in the market right now, as you touched on, it's a seller's market. So, price and earnest money are critical. So if you're really low on price, you're really low on earnest money, and you're not willing to go non-refundable, then you could probably turn this off and go watch something else. Go watch an underwriting podcast or something. But assuming you're in the ballpark and price and earnest money, which in every deal we do, generally we've got 4 or 5 people bunched up at the top. So assuming that's you're one of those 4 or 5 people, then what? How do you get over the hump and win? And so that's really what I want to try to cover today, and just give people a couple of practical nuggets that they can implement moving forward. And none of it's rocket science, but I think having a clear and concise picture all in one place is a great way for people to take action. So we'll start with number 1. On a competitive deal, I know in a lot of situations people have non-refundable money on every situation. So to say number 1, I would say no access agreement is a hot button item right now. Of course, everybody would love to have it. On an off-market deal, it may be a different conversation because you haven't had a chance to be as thorough, and you didn't have 30+ days to dig into the deal in many cases. But on a marketed deal where it's been out for 4 or 5 weeks, I think that's critical. You need to get comfortable with the asset and all the different elements that go with it. during that 30-day period of time. And so
what is an access agreement? Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what you're talking about there.
Absolutely.
So an access agreement is basically somebody saying, hey, I'm, during that period of time we're going to be negotiating the contract. I just want to go out to the property and maybe walk a percentage of the units or bring a bunch of contractors out. It's essentially doing due diligence before you're in escrow. And so I think from a buyer standpoint, and really from a seller standpoint, probably more importantly, if they select you as a buyer, if you want them to select you as a buyer, that's an opportunity for you to potentially blow out of a deal. And that's obviously what they're trying to avoid, and certainly what we're trying to avoid as brokers too. So it may make you uncomfortable, but I would say if you're looking for a little competitive edge, if we had 4 or 5 that are all trying to buy a deal, I would say it's not unusual for 2 of those to be requesting an access agreement. So that might be a quick way to differentiate yourself.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're in a top 4 or 5 and you're about to submit your final offer and you're drawing up an LOI, I would add to it that, you want to check in with a guy like Nick and his team if you're going to be doing that, and just ask them, what, look, I'm thinking about putting an access agreement into this final bid. Should I do that? And Nick's obviously going to give you the straight answer. He's going to tell you that for this deal, that's probably not something you should do. So make sure you check in on the final LOI and make sure that you've got the marching orders from the broker to give yourself the best shot.
Yeah, and I would also tell you, I mean, you can obviously tell a lot about the condition of a property, when you go out and tour it. But if it's had a recent agency loan on it and it's owned by a pretty sophisticated owner, I mean, that property has been picked apart, and you could at least have some comfort level that there's not going to be anything majorly wrong out there. So again, I know it makes some people uncomfortable, but if you're looking for that little edge, I would say that's certainly an important deal point that people and sellers in particular are really looking hard at right now.
All right. So no access agreement. What's the next one, Nick? What do you got?
Yeah. So number 2, I would say just having your lender / mortgage broker engaged with the broker during the process. In other words, it's very easy just to throw something out and get a quick quote. But if I've heard from Paul 3 or 4 times during the marketing, and he's come out and toured the property, and I'm really engaged with him, that's going to be conveyed to the seller, and that's going to give the seller a nice comfort level with how diligent the buyer's been. You could certainly say the same thing about the management company and any other vendors, talking to a property tax consultant, et cetera. But of course, the debt piece is 75 to 80% of your capital stack. So that's an extremely, extremely important piece. And having a high comfort level with the nuances of the property is critical. And the seller is certainly going to ask us about each of these offers, and to be able to convey that amount of homework that's already been done, it would give you a distinct advantage.
Right.
I would add further to that, Nick, and I would say that not only is it good for you as the broker to have a strong opinion of the potential buyer's ability to close, but let's face it, if you're going into a huge deal like this, the lender is going to be 70 to 80% of the capital stack. And so you really want to make sure that the lender is on board with this asset in and of itself, aside from making sure you get the deal, because what you don't want to do is get into and potentially get awarded a deal where the lender comes back and says, look, you know what, we think that we may have some issues with this property. That's going to be egg on your face with the broker. And that's also potentially going to be a loss of some earnest money. So it's really a good idea to have the broker with you from day one, the lending broker that is with you from day one.
Yeah, and I would also say on most of these deals, certainly on our team, we're trying to find value in any way possible, whether it's parking spaces or yards or something they're charging for that other people aren't charging for, or something they're not charging for that maybe it's rubs or something like that. So just having an understanding of how the lender's viewing the buyer's business plan and what credit they're giving and what credit they're not giving is really, really important from our standpoint. And again, if you have a very similar price and earnest money going non-refundable, these are the little tiebreakers, and that's what we're talking about here.
Yep. So number 2 is make sure you get your lender involved on the front end and make sure that they're communicating multiple times with the broker during the process. So what do you got, Nick? What's the next tip you can give to us?
So number 3 is having your attorney teed up and ready to go. And so what I mean by that is if you're talking to the broker, you're talking to the seller on a buyer interview call, hey, Mr. Seller, if you send me the first draft of the contract today, I'm going to have edits back to you tomorrow. Or if you send it to me this morning, I'm going to have it back to you this afternoon. Like, that's not easy to do. And obviously most attorneys have other things on their plate. But if you know that you have this deadline coming up and you have your attorney teed up and ready, that's pretty powerful. And again, because it's not easy, it's a way that you could really build some goodwill with a prospective seller, and it would be impressive, because that's one of the biggest frustrations is, hey, I've awarded a deal. Now it's dragging after I picked this particular buyer. Why is it taking so long? And so that I just feel strongly, if you can have that piece ready, that's a way to really separate yourself when it comes to
I'd also want to highlight too is work with a contracts attorney. Don't work with an attorney that may work on estate planning or may work on something else that is not part of the transaction. So if you're looking for a referral, talk with your lender, talk with Nick or one of his guys that can give you a referral to a contracts attorney that is definitely going to be on your side, but has seen numerous contracts that they have either drawn up or highlighted or redlined that can help you move the ball forward faster with somebody that's done it, 100 different ways. So I definitely think having somebody that's been doing this for a long period of time definitely helps you win the transaction.
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thing to that, which is that I think a lot of investors, especially private investors who are still growing in their business and gaining more experience, which we do a lot of business with those types, and I know, Paul, that you do as well.
Sure.
But, I think a lot of times they send the contract over to their attorney and just let them kind of go to work and just take that advice, regardless of what it is. I would say, having the attitude and making sure your attorney is aware that, hey, look, I don't want you to bleed all over this thing. If it's something that you feel very strong about, then mark it up. But otherwise, let's go. I'm ready to roll and get this thing in escrow.
That's right.
I just think that simple conversation would go a long way towards speeding the process up. Because at the end of the day, all of these deal points that get marked up, end up getting reconciled anyway. And most of the time the seller's like, hey, I'm not good with this, this, and this. And the buyer's like, oh, okay, no problem. We'll just change it back. And it could be avoided and a much smoother process if there was just a little more communication with the attorney up front. And again, I'm not suggesting anything material be just ignored, but
I will tell you one of the things that I like is after the deal has been awarded, having the two attorneys talk instead of going back and forth with the emails. Those emails typically take a week to have somebody make a decision what's going on. But if they can talk right from the beginning after the deal has been awarded, that helps tremendously.
I think that's a great point. I think it's a great point, and something we try to do all the time is get the attorneys on the same page from day one.
Definitely keeps your costs down.
Yeah,
so get them on the phone. A half-hour conversation or 20-minute conversation will save you thousands of dollars of emails going back and forth.
It's such a great point. The other thing I would add my side is that typically these sellers are going to have a boiler template for a contract ready to go. So make sure that you actually ask the broker if you can get access to that template ahead of time, maybe even way before the deal is awarded, so that you can actually have your attorney look through it and already have their red lines ready to go in case you are selected as the winner. And because in this market, I can tell you for sure that typically you're expected to be able to get through a contract and close on it within a week, maybe 2 weeks max. Max. So that you don't have much time to really get things done once you get awarded the deal.
Yeah, JC, that's a really good point. We try to respect the effort and energy that people put into these deals, and generally we don't ask people to review and make markups to a contract before they've been awarded a deal. However, if you were willing to spend that money and take that risk, that would be a great thing for you to do, to tell the seller, hey, look, here's my LOI, here's my terms. I'm ready on this, this, and this. And by the way, I've already had my counsel mark up your template, and we've got very few changes, and here they are. That would be a very powerful differentiator. So, again, if somebody approached us and asked for that, we could probably make that happen. But we generally don't ask for that from the buyer. So yes, that's a really, really good point.
Yep. So number 3 is make sure your attorney is involved on the front end, and make sure that they're working really closely with you to make sure that the deal happens pretty quickly. So what do you got, Nick? What's the next one?
What's 4?
Yep. Number 4, the buyer interview call, and its importance. I would say that a few things. Number 1, and some people may not know what this is. On larger transactions, generally you got 4 or 5 people that are all kind of neck and neck. We will schedule a call with the seller and buyer on the line, and I'll moderate that call, or Bard will moderate those calls. And really, it's just a chance for the seller to get a chance to hear directly from the buyer, figure out who they would be dealing with, and go from there. And it may, they may connect with a particular buyer, or just really like someone better, or really not like someone. And so I guess that the importance of this, in my opinion, is number 1, for a buyer to be extremely prepared for this call. I think oftentimes buyers just get on the call and wing it, candidly, and just talk about a little bit about who they are. I think there's a lot of rambling on the call. I think if I was a buyer, I would approach it and say, hey, look, what do I want to make sure the seller knows and takes away about me, about my seriousness to buy this particular asset, and and just be really concise with that.
Be positive on the call. So what happens is, a lot of the guys that I see trying to get on the call that do not make the cut, they try to retrade the deal with the seller on the phone. They start talking about how bad the paint looks, what's going on in the interiors, and they try to retrade the deal on the phone. Do not do that. Be very positive. Talk a little bit about where you got the property taxes. Talk a little bit about what your rehab plans are. Tell them where the equity is coming from. That's already committed capital, that people are already going to put money into the deal. Talk about the transaction itself, when you think you're going to close, how the loan's going to be financed, who's going to do it, what their experience level is, who your partners are in this deal, what they've done in the past. I mean, don't try to get on the phone and retrade the deal. Let Nick handle the call, and he'll let you have the microphone to talk a little bit about it, but don't try to retrade the deal with the seller.
I would also just say, to be humble. I think a lot of times people want to try to impress a seller and almost come across as a little egotistical at times, and want to present themselves as if, hey, I belong at the table here and I'm the real deal. And I think the seller knows you're the real deal, or they wouldn't be interviewing you in the first place. I would just, approach it with humility. And I would say, most importantly, if you take nothing away from this bullet point, other than this, is the seller needs to know from your mouth as clearly as possible that if you choose me, this will be, just forget about it. It's over. It's done. This will be the easiest transaction of your life. And this deal is very important to me, and I will make it happen. And
I think you're talking about the JC Castillo playbook. That's exactly how JC is on every call that he has with the seller.
Well, I've closed a lot of deals with JC, so I definitely know that. And it's obviously worked for him, and it's worked for a number of other people. But I just, those calls, it's amazing. I think it's real easy to go through the motions when you fill out the questionnaire and you do those calls. But if you're real serious about a deal, I just feel like in general, people don't put enough time and effort into preparing for that call and really understanding what the seller's hot buttons are. And so, hey, call me and say, hey, what do I really need to emphasize? What are the seller's hot buttons? A lot of times I won't offer that up unless people are digging in, because it's really kind of another test to see who wants the deal, who's really digging in, who's getting prepared for the call. That's kind of the point of it, is who's prepared. And so, I don't want to make them prepared. I want to know who is prepared. So, so it's very important. And it ultimately is generally the tiebreaker. If it's in addition to these other things, the first 3 points are all things you can convey on that buyer interview call. But ultimately, a lot of times that's the tiebreaker. The seller has a real good feel for who they would most like to work with after those calls. And sometimes the opposite, who they definitely don't want to work with.
I mean, wow, Nick, it's such great advice, man. I really got to thank you. I'm going to go ahead and recap these because this is really important. So number one is, in this market, no access agreement really is kind of standard procedure. That's what you guys should expect out there. Number two is make sure you get your lender involved and that you have your lender communicating with the broker ahead of time that you're qualified to do the deal from a lending perspective. Number three is make sure you've got your attorney lined up ahead of time and make sure that they're turning things around real quickly and that you're managing them so that they don't kill the deal with red lines. And number four is if there's a buyer interview call that's part of the deal, make sure that you're number one, that you're prepared, and make sure you've got a little bit of humble pie so that you don't come across as a kind of a cocky person. And that's really important to a seller, knowing that they can transact with somebody that they're going to feel good about. Did I summarize that right, Nick?
Absolutely.
Well, Nick, thanks a lot. Why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you if they want to work with an amazing broker in the areas that you transact?
Yeah. Our website is multifamilyadvisors.com. And you can reach me by phone directly at 972-755-5214. And we'd love to talk with anybody. We have a large team of 15 that works with investors who are trying to buy their first deal, which could be a very small deal, and obviously up to very large transactions. And as you touched on earlier, we're really kind of in this entire region. So we have access to deals not just in DFW, but in this entire region. So sure appreciate both of you guys and for having me on today.
That's great. Well, Paulie, if somebody wants to do a loan with a really great lending agent, lending company, how can they get a hold of you?
Let me see if I can find one. Again, Paul Peebles, Old Capital, go to oldcapitallending.com, oldcapitallending.com. I've closed 5,700 apartment loans. They've been doing it for about 35 years. Give us a call. And JC, how about you?
Well, as you guys know, if you want to schedule a free 15-minute consultation with our company, a principal at our company, you can go to our website at multifamilypropertygroup.com, go to the Contact Us section, and just submit a request to schedule a 15-minute consultation. We'd be happy to talk with you about how we might be able to help you out. So that's all we got for the show today. Thanks a lot for joining, and we will talk to you next time. Signing out. Thanks a lot.